Hannah Arendt has some interesting and thought-provoking views on totalitarian regimes. Mm, Under totalitarian regimes, she covered Nazism and Stalinism. Now we're going to discuss the things she said on the nature of evil. The nature of evil. How evil is produced, or how the nature of the contemporary evil that is produced through political systems is different from our ordinary notions of evil. But before this, let us discuss the context of her views. Hannah was born in Hanover in a German Jewish family. She enrolled at University of Marburg to study with Martin Heidegger in 1924. In 1928, she submitted her thesis on Augustinian conception of love to Karl Jaspers, with whom she had enduring intellectual friendship. And around that time, Germany was experiencing anti-Semitism. And Hannah was briefly imprisoned for doing some illegal research into anti-Semitism. So she had to flee Germany in 1933. She left for Paris. And she faced problems there also. In 1940, she was detained by the French as an alien when Germany invaded France. So she had to leave France, and she reached US in 1941. And there she would stay there for the rest of her life. So she was a Jew and working for Jewish organizations both in Germany and in France, and had training under one great philosopher, that was Heidegger, and influenced by Karl Jaspers. One philosopher again, coming under the school of existentialism. So she had Jewish background, experience of working in Jewish organizations, had philosophical exposure, and she wanted to put all that into writing. And she wrote this book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, published in 1951. This was this got her instant name because the topic was new and she had command over the subject. She wrote on anti-Semitism and imperialism, but it was the totalitarianism that got wider recognition. All these three were written in this book. And next, she wrote The Human Condition in 1958, which is more refined, and this is considered her most accomplished work. Okay. So, these books established her as an important Jewish philosopher in US. It was around that time Eichmann, who was a Nazi official, was a major organizer of the Holocaust, was kidnapped by Israeli agents in Argentina. Eichmann fled to Argentina, but Israeli agents captured him and brought him to Jerusalem to put him on trial. And it was at that time Hannah requested the New Yorker, a weekly magazine, that she would report on this trial. So New Yorker employed Hannah instead of a philosopher, Hannah, who is a philosopher, instead of one regular journalist. And Hannah went to Jerusalem to report. But why was Hannah interested? Hannah was interested because she wanted to see a Nazi official who was involved in many crimes in flesh. She wanted to know how was it like because she did not attend those Nuremberg trials. So Hannah was curious about what kind of people she wrote and heard and studied about. So Hannah goes to Jerusalem as a special correspondent to New Yorker. Okay. And it is here what she found was a total surprise to her. And she thought so much about it without giving herself any particular time limit. She worked and she gave her account to the magazine and finally published as a book. This is the first edition of the book, Eichmann in Jerusalem. Okay. This has a subtitle that is a report on the banality of evil. This banality of the evil would become a famous phrase. But what did she mean by this banality of evil, and what is her notion of evil? Essentially, Hannah went to see a monster in Eichmann. Surely, anybody expects a Nazi official to be who worked in concentration camps, an extremely bad and evil person and a monster. So Hannah was no exception to that. What is meant by a monster? We believe, see, if somebody did so many killings, okay, we expect him to be extremely bad, very bad, evil, and we are likely to think intelligent in the sense that, and he is deciding or deciding for himself, independent. So we think that a bad man is responsible for his actions, and we tend to hate. We are not likely to think that they are stupid, silly, and they are not acting on what they thought, and they were thinking that they were right. But Hannah found a completely different Eichmann. First of all, he found Eichmann to be very dumb. And rather silly. And strangely, he doesn't have any strong anti-Jews views personally. And he was just doing his duty, that is following orders coming from the top, and simply a bureaucrat seeking promotion. So, if you see the actions of a Nazi official, they were so monstrous. But the person who is behind those monstrous activities is not a monster. So Hannah took time to understand, theorize what was going on, though she had worked on that issue in 2 books by that time. For example, she wrote that Eichmann showed no case of insane hatred of Jews, of fanatical anti-Semitism, or indoctrination of any kind. He personally never had anything whatever against Jews. He personally had nothing against Jews. And he was not an intelligent man. He was not able to complete either high school or vocational training, and only found his first significant job through family connections. He suffers from lack of imagination and inability to think. Sometimes he bragged about things he did. And the bragging was the vice that Eichmann's undoing, showing how stupid, how naive Eichmann was. Then she wrote that despite all the efforts of the prosecution, everybody could see that this man was not a monster. But it was difficult indeed not to suspect that he was a clown. And since this suspicion would have been fatal to the enterprise, his trial, and was also rather hard to sustain in view of the sufferings he and his like had caused to millions of people, his worst clowneries were hardly noticed and almost never reported. So, in effect, she went to see a monster and she found a clown there. One silly person. And she reported like that, she wrote like that, which shocked many people. And in addition, she said, she said things which are critical of what was going on. She called it a show trial managed by Prime Minister Ben Gurion. And she said Eichmann was being tried for crimes in retrospect, because when they were committed, they were not crimes. And then he was being tried in a territory on which he did not commit crimes. He committed them in Germany and is being tried in Jerusalem. And in addition to that, she criticized Jewish councils for not doing enough in preventing Holocaust. Not that they could have prevented, but her charge was that they did not cooperate, but they did not actively resist. They could have done something much more. So, so she doesn't criticize Eichmann enough, and she's criticizing the Israeli government and the Jews. So to many, she looked like blaming the victims. Okay. So people were shocked by the views expressed by Hannah in describing um, one of the worst tragedies of 20th century. And she was not amenable to people's suggestions or criticism. She was being called arrogance and no feelings. How can she say such things about the people who committed such atrocious things? Okay. But then, uh, what Hannah described has certain theoretical implications. And Hannah did not yield to public criticism because those theoretical implications are very significant. Hannah looked at things theoretically and conceptually and stuck to her ground. So, though very controversial at the time, her description withstood the scrutiny of time. This is a case that somebody goes to report an event. Reporting becomes more important, more significant than the event itself. The way a person reports, like Hannah did in this case, has an enduring value, regardless of the specifics of the event. Because in her report, Hannah is reporting the nature of modern evil. And in that, she is truly thinking like a political scientist, a political theorist. The controversial phrase was that banality of evil. How can the evil that killed millions could be banal? Banal means very dull, ordinary. Okay. Hannah did not mean the crime or the action itself was insignificant. Okay. But that the person committed is very ordinary. So a very ordinary man is committing an extraordinary crime. How are ordinary people able to commit these extraordinary crimes? Was a question that interested her. She felt this is a different kind of crime because going by the crime, it is so huge. But when you try to find the criminal, according to Hannah, there is in fact no criminal. What is meant by that? She said that violence of such proportion are committed not by persons but by the people who lost the personhood. A movie is made on this. The title Hannah Arendt. And Hannah answers the criticism of her report in a speech, as shown in this film, that is given before a group of students. She says, this trial was about a new type of crime which did not previously exist. A court had to define Eichmann as a man on trial for his deeds. It was not a system or an ideology that was on trial, only a man. But Eichmann was a man who renounced all qualities of personhood, thus showing that great evil is committed by nobodies without motives or intentions. These great crimes are committed by people who surrendered their personhood, who became more or less robots. So she discovered that great crimes are not committed by people but by nobodies. We can say in modern language, committed by people who became robots. So in a way, Hannah went to see a monster there. Instead, she found a silly robot. How humans became robots? Under what conditions this would happen? Is the question she asked, and she felt that her theoretical understanding of the nature of totalitarianism is only reinforced by what happened of Eichmann. Thank you.